Bail set at $10 million for the man accused of killing a mother of 6.
April 24th, 2022. 5 a.m. Racine, Wisconsin. A Ring doorbell camera captures something chilling. Brittany Booker walks out of her home in the early morning darkness. Behind her, a man's voice cuts through the silence. Go. She pauses for just a second, turns her head back as if looking for help, then continues to her car. Inside that house, her 6 children are sleeping. The oldest is 13. The youngest just 2 years old. 4.5 hours later, that 13-year-old wakes up. His mother is gone. Her car is missing. When he checks her bedroom, he finds blood. He immediately calls 911. Police arrive and begin searching. They don't have to search long. Just blocks from her home, they find Brittany Booker in her vehicle. She's deceased. Brittany was 30 years old, a mother of 6 children, and she'd just graduated from nursing school. But here's what makes this story even more tragic. Brittany had never been in a relationship with Terry Jackson. She wasn't his ex-girlfriend. She had no personal connection to him whatsoever. But 2 months earlier, she'd helped a friend escape from Terry's abusive grip. When they went to collect the friend's belongings, Terry attacked them both with a hammer. Both women ended up in the hospital. 2 months later, Terry came for Brittany again. This time, she didn't survive, but the friend she'd risked her life to help, she's still alive. Before we get too deep, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you find value in these discussions. Terry Jackson was 42 years old when he killed Brittany Booker. At the time, he was out on bond for substance charges. But to understand what happened to Brittany, you need to understand who Terry Jackson really was. His criminal record stretched back to 1998. Drugs, battery, assault. For over 2 decades, Terry had been cycling in and out of the system. Between 2002 and 2015, jail became a revolving door for him. He'd go in, he'd come out, and the pattern would repeat. The kind of man whose violence wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a lifestyle. Terry was living with Brittany's friend. Their relationship was toxic from the start, marked by control, intimidation, and violence. Brittany had seen it firsthand. She watched her friend endure the kind of abuse that leaves marks you can't always see. The fear, the manipulation, the constant walking on eggshells, never knowing what would set him off next. Brittany knew her friend needed to get out, but leaving an abuser is never simple. It's dangerous, and in this case, it would prove to be deadly. In mid-February 2022, Brittany's friend finally made the decision to leave Terry. She gathered her courage and walked away. But here's where things get complicated, where victims often make choices that seem impossible to understand from the outside. She made a deal with Terry, a dangerous compromise. She agreed not to press charges against him if he moved to Illinois and left her alone. Think about that for a moment. No police involvement, no restraining order, no legal protection. Just a promise from a violent man with a 24-year criminal history that he would simply leave and never come back. It's the kind of agreement that makes you want to scream at the screen, knowing what's coming next. But this is the reality for so many abuse victims. They're exhausted. They're terrified. They just want it to be over without making things worse. Terry agreed to the terms. He packed up and left for Illinois. For a brief moment, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, this would actually work. The friend was finally free. Brittany could breathe easier knowing her friend had escaped, but on February 20th, just days after Terry had supposedly moved away for good, Brittany's friend got in her car and drove to Chicago. She was going to pick Terry up. He had a court date back in Racine on the 22nd, and she'd agreed to bring him back. The same man she'd just escaped from, the same man whose violence had driven her away. She was bringing him back. The drive from Chicago back to Racine should have taken about 90 minutes. It took much longer than that. And what happened during that car ride would set everything else in motion. Somewhere along the route, Terry told his ex-girlfriend to pull over. They were behind Gateway Technical College, away from traffic, away from witnesses. And that's when he attacked her. For 3 hours, she was trapped in that car with him. 3 hours of terror that would later be detailed in a criminal complaint that's almost impossible to read. Terry choked her. He threatened her with a box cutter, the blade close enough to make his point devastatingly clear. And then he said the words that would haunt everything that followed. "If you report me, I will kill you." Not a threat made in the heat of the moment. A promise. A guarantee of what would happen if she dared to involve the police. On February 21st, the day after the attack, she went to the hospital. The medical staff took one look at her injuries and knew this wasn't an accident. They contacted the police immediately. She gave them a full statement about what Terry had done to her during those 3 hours in that car. She told them about the choking, the box cutter, the death threat. She told them everything. Police issued a warrant charging Terry Jackson with attempted murder. But by the time they went looking for him, Terry was already gone, vanished. No arrest was made. 6 days passed. No sign of Terry anywhere. His ex-girlfriend, recovering from her injuries and processing her trauma, started to believe that maybe he'd actually listened to his own agreement. Maybe he'd gone back to Illinois and would stay there this time. Maybe the worst was behind her. On February 27th, she decided it was safe enough to go back to her old apartment. She needed to get her belongings, the things she'd left behind when she'd fled, but she didn't want to go alone. So she called Brittany Booker and asked if she would come with her. Brittany said yes. She always said yes when her friend needed help. That's who Brittany was. Loyal. Protective. The kind of friend who shows up when someone is scared and vulnerable. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think about the danger she might be putting herself in. She just knew her friend needed her. Brittany even brought her 2-year-old daughter with her that day. In her mind, they were just picking up some belongings from an empty apartment. Terry was in Illinois. He was gone. What could possibly go wrong? Everything was about to go wrong. When they arrived at the apartment on February 27th, Brittany's friend immediately knew something was wrong. Her belongings weren't there. Everything she'd left behind was gone. Confused and frustrated, she did something that would prove to be a fatal mistake. She called Terry to ask where her stuff was. That phone call told him exactly where they were. Terry came through the back door carrying a hammer. He went after his ex-girlfriend first, the woman he'd already tried to kill in a car just a week earlier. Brittany started screaming for him to stop. She fumbled for her phone, trying to call 911 simultaneously grabbing a knife from the kitchen. She had her 2-year-old daughter to protect. She had her friend to protect. And Terry Jackson was swinging a hammer. Then he turned on Brittany. "I'm going to kill you," he yelled. And he meant it. He attacked her with that hammer, and Brittany fought back with everything she had. But she was outmatched. She made a decision in that moment. She ran. She sprinted out of that apartment, desperately looking for help, for safety, for anyone who could stop what was happening. She pounded on a neighbor's door, but no one was home. She kept running, her head bleeding, her vision blurring, until she finally collapsed outside George Tavern on Main Street. People inside the bar saw her through the window. They called 911 immediately. When police arrived, they found both women seriously injured. Both were rushed to the hospital. Police Chief Maurice Robinson would later describe what Terry Jackson had done that day, the brutality of it, the premeditation of it. Terry was charged with 2 counts of attempted intentional homicide. Another warrant was issued for his arrest. The manhunt began. It would stretch across 5 states: Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Texas, Arizona. Law enforcement searched everywhere. They put out alerts. They followed leads. They tracked down tips. Terry Jackson wasn't found. Days turned into weeks. News stations broadcasted his photo. "Have you seen this man?" they asked viewers. The community was on edge. 2 women had nearly been beaten to death with a hammer, and the man who did it was still out there somewhere, free, unaccounted for, and extremely dangerous. Brittany went home from the hospital to her 6 children. She had a concussion, over 20 staples in her head, a fractured skull, bleeding on her brain. But she was alive. Her friend was alive. They'd both survived Terry Jackson's attack. But surviving the attack was one thing. Living with the knowledge that he was still out there, that he promised to kill her, that law enforcement couldn't find him, that was something else entirely. Something that would consume Brittany for the next 60 days of her life. Brittany returned home to her 6 children, but normal life was impossible. Her head was stapled back together. Her skull was fractured. There was bleeding on her brain. But the physical wounds weren't even the worst part. It was the fear, the constant, suffocating knowledge that Terry Jackson was out there somewhere and he'd promised to kill her. On March 5th, just days after the attack, Brittany posted on Facebook. She was angry. People in the community were spreading rumors about what had happened. Some were even defending Terry, making excuses for him, blaming her and her friend for somehow provoking the attack. Brittany had had enough. She wrote that when Terry attacked her, she had her daughter in her arms during the first hits. She hadn't done anything to him. She didn't even touch him. She tried to run, knocking on doors, begging for help. "I could have been taken from my children that day," she wrote. The post was raw, furious, and heartbreaking. "Once a man picks up a hammer," she said, "nothing else matters." Her father, Leonard Larry, watched his daughter change over those next 2 months. The Brittany who came home from the hospital wasn't the same person who'd walked into that apartment trying to help a friend. Now she sprinted from her front door to her car, every single time. She was always looking behind her, checking shadows, scanning faces. The fear had taken root deep in her bones. She knew Terry had promised to kill her, and for 60 days, police couldn't find him anywhere. What Brittany didn't know was that Terry had help. Lots of it. His cousin, Alicia Sykes, had driven him all the way to Texas along with another woman named Carmelita Walker. This was just days after the hammer attack, when Terry was already wanted for attempted murder. They picked him up in Chicago and drove him across state lines, helping a violent fugitive evade law enforcement. Then there was Diamond Hood. She was in a relationship with Terry, and she admitted to police that she knew about the hammer attack. She knew what he'd done to Brittany and her friend. And she still let him use her SUV. She still let him stay in her home. According to court documents, it was Hood's SUV that Terry had used during the February 27th attack. The same vehicle may have been involved when he came for Brittany again. These women weren't passive bystanders. They actively helped Terry Jackson stay hidden while Brittany lived in terror, while her children watched their mother flinch at every sound, while law enforcement searched 5 states trying to find him. 60 days. That's how long Brittany lived knowing her killer was out there. 60 days of checking over her shoulder. 60 days of racing to her car. 60 days of tucking her children into bed and wondering if she'd be there to wake them up in the morning. The system had failed her, and time was running out. April 24th, 2022. 5 a.m. Terry Jackson broke into Brittany's home while her 6 children slept. What happened inside that house left blood in Brittany's bedroom and a trail leading through the hallway. But the Ring doorbell camera captured what happened next, and it's an image that would haunt everyone who saw it. Brittany walks out of her house toward her car. Behind her, a man's voice. "Go." She pauses. She turns her head back, just for a second. Her father, Leonard Larry, would later watch that footage over and over. "It was like my daughter looked back like saying, 'Help me,'" he said. "My daughter would have ran, but she took that for her kids." Brittany knew if she resisted, if she screamed, if she fought back, Terry might go inside that house. He might hurt her children. So she walked to her car. She left with him, and she saved her children's lives by sacrificing her own. At 9:30 that morning, her 13-year-old son woke up. His mother was gone. Her car was missing. He walked into her bedroom and found blood. He called 911. Police arrived and immediately began piecing together what had happened. They found the blood trail. They tracked Brittany's phone and found it near 15th and Park Avenue. Then, just blocks from Brittany's home near 13th and Villa Street, they found her car. Brittany was in the driver's seat. She was deceased. GPS data would later show that Terry had driven around Racine for hours with Brittany before her body was discovered. 6 children had lost their mother, and Terry Jackson had fled once again. The manhunt intensified. Police issued public alerts with Terry's photos plastered across every news station. The U.S. Marshals took over the search. Crime Stoppers offered a $2,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. The community gathered for a vigil, lighting candles, releasing balloons into the sky. Leonard Larry stood before the crowd and said what everyone was thinking. She didn't have to die like that. Nearly 1 month later, on May 22nd, U.S. Marshals finally caught up with Terry Jackson in Chicago. After a brief standoff, he was arrested. During questioning, Terry offered a confession. Police Chief Maurice Robinson confirmed it to the media, though he didn't share the details of what Terry had admitted to. Terry Jackson was charged with 23 felonies, including first-degree intentional homicide for Brittany Booker's murder. His bond was set at $10 million. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. Hundreds gathered for Brittany's funeral. Leonard Larry stood before the congregation, overcome with grief, trying to find words that could somehow make sense of losing his daughter. "I lost my kid," he said through tears. The community demanded justice, but everyone knew that no verdict, no sentence, no amount of prison time would bring Brittany back to her children. The preventable tragedy had occurred. The woman who'd only wanted to help a friend, who'd done nothing except show compassion and courage, was gone, and 6 children would grow up without their mother. Terry Jackson remains in custody, awaiting trial. If convicted of first-degree intentional homicide, he faces life in prison without parole. Diamond Hood, Alicia Sykes, and Carmelita Walker each face up to 10 years for helping him evade police. But no sentence will bring Brittany back. Her 6 children are being raised by their grandfather, Leonard Larry, and their grandmother. Leonard has kept his promise, attending every court hearing, making sure the system doesn't forget his daughter. On Mother's Day, weeks after her murder, the community gathered to honor Brittany's memory. They remembered a nursing school graduate, a mother of 6, a loyal friend who gave her life protecting the children sleeping inside her home. Brittany Booker was 30 years old. On April 24, 2022, she walked out of her door knowing what might happen. She looked back one last time, then chose her children's safety over her own. Her last act protected them, even when it cost her everything. The system failed Brittany, but her story continues in her children, in her father's fight for justice, in a community that refuses to forget her sacrifice. Rest in peace, Brittany Booker. I hope these stories help you recognize warning signs and encourage you to seek help or offer support before it's too late. Please subscribe, like, and share this page so we can continue bringing these important stories to light.